I glared at him. My blood, I said, with my voice raised. Why do you need my blood, Henry? That's not as simple as just some herbs. You said that it would take less to break it than to cast it. From the sounds of it, it's not going to be that simple, seeing as how you need some of my blood. Henry looked at me with sad eyes and took a deep breath. He had to know that my concern was valid. This was ludicrous. I didn't know how fond I was of the idea of having my blood used in some ritual. Look at what it did to Henry all those years ago. Who's to say that I wouldn't have to carry that same weight, reversal spell or not? This was dark, evil stuff. It's bad enough that it happened on our property, much less having my blood used to counteract it. Did I want to help Henry? Sure. Did I want to have to use a portion of myself in the way of blood to do that? Absolutely not. I know, Mark, Henry said. It's a very big ask, and I wouldn't have come to you, but there's no other way. I also understand if you say no. But according to this book here, if you don't, these beasts that are roaming your property will never leave. They may even grow stronger over time, since there's nothing really to stop them. It's not just your blood that's needed. My blood will also be used. I was the first to cast it, so I need to use my blood to end it as well. I don't know about this, Connie said as she gulped down another cup of coffee. This is just more than I'd ever dreamed. Henry, you have to understand where we're coming from. This is very dangerous stuff, and then Mark's blood being used is just beyond the pale. I excused myself from the table without saying a word and went out on the back deck. I had to think this through. I just wanted to be back in the same mental state that I was when I woke up. Reading my fictional Dogman book and drinking my coffee. Happy, peaceful. I don't know if being able to obtain that sense of tranquility would be possible now. Probably not, if I'm being honest with myself. I tried so hard to put myself in Henry's shoes. I wanted to help him. I really did. Maybe I just need to talk to John. He may be able to talk this through with me. First, I felt that I needed to make things right with Henry. He's in a terrible bind, and I knew the courage it had to take for him to even ask me for my blood. I called Henry out on the deck, and he sat solemnly in front of me, almost afraid to make eye contact. Look, I want to apologize for my behavior. I know what I said was brash, and I know that you had to ask. We'll figure this out, but I need more time. I'm going over to talk this over with John and see what he says. Henry smiled. I forgive you. I know the position that I put you in, and I know that I would have reacted the same way. I'll give you time, but we can't wait too long. According to the Book of Shadows, this has to be carried out on the first full moon. Great, only a few days. I guess that's better than nothing, though. I brought the book inside and laid it on the bedside table. I grabbed my keys, kissed Connie on the cheek, and went to see John. He wants your what? John asked, shocked. I knew that he and Marie would be just as surprised as Connie and I were. This was a big pill to swallow, and certainly not a place that any of us expected to find ourselves. But nonetheless, here we were. How can you be sure that this will even work, Mark? John said. This book you said was found in the archives, so it has to be old and no doubt dated as all get out. Who's to say the spell will even work? I sighed. I know, John, and that's my dilemma. After everything we've heard about and everything that he's been through the years, and then meeting Otis, I can't even guarantee you what reality even is anymore. But at the same time, we have to take into consideration that he's done this before. If anyone knows how spells and incantations work, it's Henry. Right, but didn't he cast the wrong spell the first time? Marie asked. That wasn't his fault, though, Marie. Otis gave him the spell to cast. Henry didn't know. What we have to look at is the fact that he was able to harness the power to cast the spell in the first place, which means he will be able to cast this one and reverse the original one. I knew in the end that this was something that I had to do. I was merely delaying the inevitable. I just needed to have my friends to tell me that they understood my position, and that it's an absolutely crazy idea to follow through with this, but most importantly, I needed to know that they were there to support this decision. Well, what did Connie say about this whole thing? Marie asked. There's no way that she's comfortable with this. You're right. She's not, I said. I think deep down, though, she knows it's the answer. She, just like me, and I'm sure that both of you as well, is just as afraid of the consequences. We've been friends for a while now, John started, and I know that you'll make the best decision and the right decision for you, Henry, and the rest of us. I know this is a lot for one person to carry, but I also know that if you weren't the one to carry this load, it wouldn't have been placed on your plate. The universe has chosen you. If it hadn't, Ashton would be the one to shoulder it. I believed John, but it was still tough. In leaving, I knew what I had to do. I had known all along. I just needed the confirmation. I went home, still contemplating everything, but knew the answer would lie with Henry and his book. I had Henry grab the book and the notebook and come out on the deck with me. It was time to have the conversation that I was dreading. How will my blood break a curse that was cast so long ago, and why couldn't it just be Henry's? But the main question that stuck out in my mind was, will I survive this ritual? Henry laid out his books and his notebook for me to see. He had dog-eared the page that carried the supposed spell that would reverse the curse. I read it with amazement. On the first full moon surrounding the wood, follow these words to find the good. Mix the blood to break the curse. If done right, it will be worse. To banish the beasts and heal your land, the blood you shed will be poured from your hand. Into the fire the concoction goes. The trees will bend as the cold wind blows. Speak these words, but don't be weary. The beast will come, and they will be scary. The evil you see will be thought to be immortal, but will vanish quickly as it enters the portal. Once all goes in, no more can come out. No more to worry, stress, or doubt. No more evil will inhabit your land from this day forward by the blood from your hand. I leaned back in my chair stunned. It was like it was written for this very moment. The words that spilled over the pages of the Book of Shadows was exactly what we needed. But a portal? What the heck was I about to get myself into? Well, it's obvious, Henry, that's what we need to do, but it says here to mix the blood. What are we mixing the blood with? I asked. My blood, Henry said. I was the previous landowner and the one who did the first incantation. You are the current landowner, the one who technically now owns not only the land, but the curse that I cast so many years ago. To make it all go back the way that it should be, the way that it was before, is to, in theory, combine you and I together in this effort to rid the land of these beasts. My mind was spinning. We only have a few days before the full moon, Henry. We need to prepare as much as possible. I knew Connie wouldn't be happy with this whole thing, but the only thing I could do is explain it the best way I could. I was now responsible for not only her well-being, but the lives and well-being of John, Marie, and Henry as well. I knew the only way for me to ensure that they would all be okay was to take part in this whether I wanted to or not. I really had no choice in the matter. As John said, the universe had chosen me. For whatever reason, I was the one that it wanted. I was kind of glad, though. I wouldn't want Ashton dealing with this with his wife and young children. Connie and I sat out on the back deck the next morning, and I told her what we'd planned. I waited for the fallout after I uttered the last words. She sat there with her cup of coffee and glared at me. She knew the consequences. She knew everything. And ultimately, she knew that I was going to go through with this. You know how I feel about this. You also know I don't agree with your decision. But if you're so hell-bent on doing this, you will at least let me get things together. The team of friends that we have all need to be here. You need gear, walkie-talkies, the whole nine. I may not be able to be out there with you, but I will at least see that you have everything that you need. That's my girl. I was so glad that she was being as supportive as she knew how to be. She was my main concern through all of this. My true motivation is Connie above all else. We called in the cavalry the next day. The first full moon would be Monday. Today was Saturday, so we needed to get going on the plan and make sure that everything was in place. Ashton and Sabrina came over shortly after Marie and John had arrived. I explained to them everything that had gone on and what was going to happen. I cursed under my breath because, of course, this would have to take place on Monday of all days. I told John and Ashton to be ready to go in case Henry called them over the walkie. Since there would be 3 cars at the house, I told the girls that if we made the call to Ashton and John, they should drive them out to the wood line, lay on the horns, and turn the bright lights on. I had no idea what to expect, so I wanted to be prepared for everything. Unbeknownst to Connie, I had gotten all of my affairs in order, just in case. That way, she only had to deal with what was necessary. We spent Sunday alone, just her and I. We sat on the back deck that morning and had our morning coffee. We had a picnic for lunch in the backyard, and we went out to dinner that evening. As we sat and talked over dinner, we discussed how nice it would be to finally be able to enjoy our new home to its fullest. Maybe after all this was over, Ashton and Sabrina could even bring their children over to play with the chickens and the pigs. We could even teach them how to milk the cows. All great thoughts that I could take out with me and Henry as we went into the woods the next evening. "So are you ready to do this?" Connie asked as she took her last sip of wine at dinner. I laid my napkin on my plate and took a drink of my iced tea. Am I ready? No. I don't think anybody would be ready for such a daunting task. To be honest, Connie, I'm I'm scared. I really have no idea what's going to happen, but according to this book, there's supposed to be beasts and a portal. It's all up in the air. I know what Henry says, and I know that without doing this, the dogman will be on our property, limiting us from doing what we plan to do. But without you, well, there's no point in any of this. Don't be a hero, Mark. I need you. I looked into her glistening green eyes that had started to fill with tears. I wouldn't do anything to jeopardize what we had. I didn't know how any of this was going to turn out, but I knew for damn sure I was going to make it back home, for her. The next morning, I woke up early and showered. I fixed a full pot of coffee and sat on the back deck finishing my book. I wish it were this easy for me. Get to a scary part of my story and be able to close the book with no obligation to pick it back up and finish it. I also wish that the dogmen on our property were as tame as the ones in this book. They weren't ravenous and they were easily scared off. I guess that's the difference between fact and fiction. But this was my story, and I couldn't just close the book on it. I had to keep turning the pages as we trudged forward to attempt to banish these hell beasts off of our property. Henry met me outside and sat down with his own steaming hot cup of coffee. Before all this takes place tonight, Mark, I just want to say thank you. Thank you for the hospitality. Thank you for the kindness you've shown, and for helping me be free of this weight that I've carried with me. I don't know where I would be right now if you and Connie hadn't put up those cameras and found me. I guess it was almost fate, really. This was supposed to happen, and I'm glad that out of anyone that I could have been teamed up with for answers to this whole mess, I'm glad it was you. So no matter what happens tonight, I want you to know that you are a true friend indeed. You also have to make sure that you come back home. When this starts to go down, you make sure you're safe, you hear me? He said with his infamous crooked smile. I smiled back at him in return and shook his hand. Deal. You and I will come out on top. We're a good team, and we will knock this out of the park. Henry and I sat out on the back deck and pored over every page of the Book of Shadows together. We had to do this right the first time, or it said it would be made worse. I didn't even want to think about what that would be like. If we did it wrong and that happened, there's no doubt that Connie and I would have to move. Possibly even John and Marie. No one would be safe then. It would be a literal nightmare. It says we have to mix our blood. Do we have anything to put it in, Henry? I don't think Connie would appreciate it if I used Tupperware for this, I chuckled. Henry laughed and shook his head. No, women don't mess around when it comes to that stuff. I have a small glass vial we can use. If you use Connie's Tupperware, the dogman will be the least of your concern. All right, so on a serious note, I said. So this tells us what to do, but is there something that we're supposed to say in this book as well? Henry closed the book. Don't you worry about that. I know exactly what to say. I just need you to offer your blood as a covenant to the land. Everything else will handle itself. I didn't know what he meant by that, but seeing as how he had done this before and I hadn't, I had to trust what he said. The day was beginning to wind down, no matter how much I tried to slow down the time. I'm not normally a procrastinator, but this situation was different. John and Marie and Ashton and Sabrina had come over around 5 that evening. We had an early dinner and got everything ready to go. Connie was quiet most of the evening. As everyone sat in the dining room going over everything, I met her in the kitchen and once again gave her the reassurance she needed that I would come back home. We'll be walking out of there in no time with all this behind us, Connie. I promise, I said. She hugged me tightly and whispered in my ear, You better. We walked back into the dining room and everyone was getting their things together. We got out all the walkie-talkies and went over the plan one more time. Henry and I strapped our bags on and went out into the front yard. Henry thanked everyone for their help and hugged them all. You ready, boss? He asked me. Ready as I'll ever be, I answered. We walked the 2 miles to the wood line. They offered to drive us, but it was a nice evening and our bags weren't that heavy. I really needed the time to clear my head anyway and really take in the whole magnitude of everything. I thought about the day before that I'd spent with Connie, the things that we had planned before we moved here, and the idea of maybe one day having children running around squealing in the backyard. I was in the perfect frame of mind once we had reached the wood line. We made it to the clearing and tossed our bags off to the side. Henry and I went through and both gathered enough sticks and brush to get a fire ready before the night fell. The air suddenly began to hang heavy around us, almost like it knew what was about to take place. Henry pulled the book and the glass vial out of his knapsack. He opened the book to the page he had dog-eared, and the wind instantly picked up. We both looked around in bewilderment. I took my knife out of my bag. Well, I guess this is the next thing we do, right? I asked Henry. He walked over. Yep, we don't need too much, just enough. We just have to make sure that we have enough for them to fully combine. He held out his hand and turned his head. I didn't want to hurt him. This was insane. Okay, Henry, I'll make this quick. I brought the knife up in the air and then back down again, hard and fast. Henry let out a yell, but then quickly grabbed the small vial and held his finger over it. I was glad that he was a good bleeder. I knew that it was my turn next, and I wasn't looking forward to it. I handed over the knife to Henry, and he propped the vial up between two rocks so it wouldn't spill over. He took my hand as I turned my head and waited for the sharp pain. It was over before I knew it. He grabbed the vial, and I squeezed the blood from my finger. He placed the small plastic cap back on it, and Henry leaned it back and forth slowly to make sure that the liquids were fully combined. You know this means that we're blood brothers now, right, Mark? He chuckled. I thought back to the times of my childhood when my friends and I would do that. It was the coolest thing back then. Now, however, it was bone-chilling. What do we do now, Henry? I asked as I looked at the vial that he had carefully placed back between the two rocks. Now, all we can do is wait. The sun is just about set, so we just have to wait for the moon. The wind was blowing cooler than normal. I guess it was just about time for fall to start setting in. I was looking forward to those months, but at the same time, Christmas is my favorite holiday. I was trying to think positive amidst the evil and negativity that surrounded both Henry and I as we waited for the moon to show her light. Henry sat silent, looking towards the sky, unbothered by the cold wind. Let's start that fire, Henry, I suggested as I grew colder by the second. Good idea, Mark. Let's get this party started, he said. With the roar of the fire, I felt more comfortable. I was definitely a lot warmer. I looked over at the small vial and noticed that something strange had started to happen. I held it up and yelled for Henry to come see. The two portions of our blood had started to almost shimmer like glitter dancing around inside. It reminded me of the lava lamp that I had as a kid. What in the world is going on, Henry? Is this supposed to happen? He looked just as confused. I can only assume. I mean, the first time I did this spell to make the blood oath, I was told wrong. This may be how it's supposed to have been, and things were just screwed up from the beginning because of Otis. As the blood continued to swirl, the winds picked up. If it blew too hard, I was afraid that it would throw out an ember and catch the woods on fire. Then everything would be screwed up and would be worse. Finally, the full moon, now fully risen. Henry and I said a prayer for protection and began. We picked up the vial and took off the cap. We each held it in our hands and slowly poured it over the fire. As the blood dripped into the flames, Henry began what it was that he needed to say. Once above, but now below, may the evil of the land pick up and go, through the winds and the air, wherever it inhabits, everywhere. Bend your ear and hear our plea. Accept this blood and set us free. With that, the fire roared even bigger than before. A bright light broke out over the top of the flames. A perfect circle formed, and it held what appeared to be a terrible lightning storm inside the circle itself. Bursts of lights crackled across the sky and made Henry and I jump. What have I done? I was afraid. My heart was racing. Henry clung to me as we dropped the vial into the flames and heard it explode. Then the winds howled and blew a frigid gust over me and Henry. The sky grew even darker than before, and the moon glowed a bright amber color. Snarls and growls could be heard all around us. They were the same sounds we had heard when we had gone camping that night. Through the trees, we could see the red eye shine coming our way, and they were moving fast. As they got closer, we saw them for all that they were. Large, ghastly bodies with red eyes and white razor-sharp fangs. The first one was sucked into the portal, howling a high-pitched screech all the way. Dark shadows began floating through the air out of the ground, each one being sucked into the portal. What the hell is that, Henry? I yelled over the roars of the wind. Evil, Mark. It's sucking all the evil out of your property. Anything with bad intentions will be gone. Just then, a low hum began, and then an iridescent glow formed off just to the side of Henry. Before our eyes, Otis appeared almost in hologram form. How the hell is Otis here? I yelled. This had all became too much, and I felt like I was going to pass out. The sound of the hum was echoing through my ears, almost vibrating my chest. I felt nauseous and dizzy. You figured it out, I see, you old coot, Otis said, pointing to the portal. I sure did, Henry yelled. No thanks to you. This was supposed to happen the first time, but you lied. Otis laughed heartily. You damn right I did. Did you really think I wanted those hellhounds on my property? I knew you would be an easy sucker as soon as I saw you kept coming into the library getting book after book to get rid of the Bigfoot. Just then, a large dog man flew past Otis and grabbed a hold of his shirt as it flew into the portal. Otis was almost taken in with him, and he sustained a large, deep scratch on his chest. No longer in hologram form, Otis could be hurt, and Henry leapt at the opportunity. He walked up to Otis, spit in his face, and punched him in the stomach. Otis fell hard to the ground as blood oozed from his wound. The fire roared louder, and the portal grew brighter as even more evil entities were sucked in. Henry and Otis were rolling around on the forest floor fighting. We were all surrounded by so much negativity it was starting to affect us. It appeared as though the portal were feeding off the negative energy. I ran over and broke up the fight and pulled both men up on their feet. But just as I did, the largest dog man I'd ever seen grabbed the back of Otis's shirt and started pulling him into the portal. Otis began to scream and flail his arms. He grabbed Henry out of instinct and pulled him off of his feet. I jumped and grabbed Henry's arm to prevent him from being sucked in. As I looked up, I could see a line of evil being fed into the portal. "Henry, I won't let you go. Please hold on as tight as you can to my arm," I yelled at the top of my voice. I should have called the guys before I had gotten this far, but now that didn't matter. What did matter was me holding on to Henry as long as I could. But the heat from the fire was causing my hands to sweat, and I was losing my grip. My hands started sliding down his arms, and I knew that I was losing the battle. "It's okay, Mark. It has to be this way. It's the only way. I read it in the book. I just didn't tell you. I knew if I told you, you wouldn't go through with this. I'm the key to this whole thing. When it said in the book that it has to be done right or it would be worse, I knew that this was how it had to end. It's the only way to fully break the curse and have you and everyone else free from all of this. Henry, I won't let you go. I just won't. We've come too far for it to end this way. Let the beast roam the property. I don't care, but I won't let you go," I yelled. Henry smiled his crooked smile and winked at me as he slipped through my hands and into the portal. I fell to the ground sobbing as the portal closed and the winds calmed. The fire returned to its normal crackle. No more snarls or growls could be heard, and the heaviness that was once felt in the air was gone. I pulled myself up off the ground and got on the walkie-talkie to everybody back home. I was sobbing into the mic that Henry was gone. I felt that it was my fault. I just couldn't hold on to him. John and Connie met me in the wood line and I collapsed into her arms. That was a long night. I will never forget it or what Henry did for us. It took months for me to come out of the fog that I felt. The loss of Henry gave us many things that he would be very proud and happy that we were able to obtain. That winter, Ashton and Sabrina brought their children over for the very first time. It was so nice to sit around a newly built fire pit, watching them make snow angels and build snowmen, free from the fear of anything coming after us. I do wish Henry could be here to see them. I feel in some ways that wherever he is, he can. I think of him often as Connie and I hunt and fish. He would be so excited about all that we've been able to do. In the end, though, I know Henry was right. I was mad for a long time, though. Mad at the whole situation, even mad at myself. But I came around to it, realizing that he was right. And that it had to be that way, no matter how much I disagreed with it. That Christmas, Connie gave me the best gift of all. She handed me a small package with a big red bow on it that read, "To Mark, love Henry." When I opened it, I cried. A whistle lay on top of a few layers of tissue paper. I would sit on the back deck when the spring came, and every time I heard a grunt in the woods, I would blow that whistle. I had my own protection whistle now, thanks to Henry. I guess I would have to be the old kook in the woods now. I was fine with that because I had the best teacher to show me how to do it in the right way.